Good morning, everyone. My name is Kathy Wade, and I'm a member of the Worship Committee. I welcome each and every one of you to our service this morning at Heritage Universalist Unitarian Church. I'm glad you're here today, both in person in the sanctuary and the Great Hall, and also via live stream. I'd like to offer a special welcome to any first-time visitors, and I'll invite you to sign our guest book on the welcome table here in the sanctuary. Or you can also do that through a link to the online guest book in chat for those of you on Zoom. If you have any questions, our greeter from the Board of Trustees is Julie Kane. Where are you, Julie? She's still outside greeting. But she'll be happy to talk with you after the service. As a new visitor, you may have questions. Also, after the service, it would be great if a few people who are willing and able could help put away chairs in the Great Hall. For others, thank you for showing respect for one another and for our safety by visiting with each other outside the building once the service is over. We're very glad you've joined us for the return of one of our senior ministers' most unusual and enjoyable services. This morning, you are free to ask Reverend Bill anything, within reason and good taste, he adds. And he will do his best to honestly and openly answer your question. Those who are worshiping today via Zoom may want to submit questions to Reverend Bill using the Zoom chat function as a way of joining with those who are in person in the sanctuary. You will also notice, those of you who have programs in your hand, that in that order of service there is a blank page where those of you here can jot down your questions in advance, but you'll be reading them out loud or saying them out loud later in the service. And now, here is Reverend Bill with our call to worship.
This morning's call to worship comes adapted from the wonderful Kathleen McTeague. Here, in the warmth of this Sabbath home, we turn our busy minds toward the things that truly matter: silence, singing, spirit. And we open our sometimes broken hearts to the possibilities inherent in this gathering: comfort, community, compassion. Here in the refuge of this Sabbath home, we move through the mysteries: the bright surprise of birth, the shadowed questions of death, the sacred path we walk in between the two, where we will be wounded and also showered with grace, amazing, unending grace. The promise we find here in this Sabbath home is that we do not walk alone. Therefore, this is a holy place in which we gather. The light of the world comes in. It comes in with us. It shines through us in the lamps of our sparkling eyes, in the gentle touch of a hand, in the bright flame of a chalice, in music and song, in silence and contemplation. Here we make our Sabbath home. Here we find sanctuary. Come, let us worship together. here in this sanctuary, out in the Great Hall, all over the world on Zoom. I invite you now to rise in body and or spirit as we sing our doxology and repeat our covenant. The words are in your program, or you may find them on a screen near you.
To the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God.
"50 years ago this month, right before Christmas, a quirky, campy, dark-humored comedy drama directed by Hal Ashby was released to a largely unreceptive American movie audience. In the half-century since, it has become a cult classic. Its life-affirming, death-affirming, existential exploration of the human experience winning hearts, minds, and even recalcitrant movie critics over. Let's do this Jeopardy style. This 1971 cult classic featured the music of Cat Stevens and starred Bud Cort and Ruth Gordon in the title roles. There are 2 correct answers here. What is Harold and Maude? And what is Bill Gupton's all-time favorite movie?
We have 2 questions from our young people for me today. You're going to get a kick out of this. So if you have any questions, I will most probably be able to take a question or 2 with the time that we have. So interestingly, both of the questions that we got from our young people today are science-based. In part because when we are together in RE, we are not only exploring nature, but doing tons of experiments to think about the world in which they live and how it works. And so that has given them the interesting impression that I am a scientist. Which I value deeply because science has not always been a thing that I have done very well. It's not one of those subjects I excelled in at school or really loved so much. And science in the way of physics was the bane of my college existence. So luckily, no one asked me a physics question. So the first question is, why do giraffes have spots? The second question is a question about frogs and why frogs have long legs. So before I answer those specific questions, I will say that it is very interesting that those are questions related to adaptation and how animals adapt to the world in which they live. You might have guessed the answer to the questions of the giraffes. Giraffes have spots, scientists mostly think, because of camouflage. And scientists say that there are slight variations in the colors of giraffe spots based upon the natural vegetation in their native environments. So the color of the spots of a giraffe will change based upon where they live and the color of the plants in that space, which I guess makes sense. When you imagine that if a giraffe has its long neck up into a tree to eat and a predator comes by, it can stay still and doesn't necessarily have to try to outrun it. The questions of frogs are kind of more interesting on some level because the adaptations that frogs have are much, much, much more extreme in terms of how they adapt to their environment. Aquatic frogs are the frogs that we think of as frogs with really long legs, and they are not necessarily for jumping as we expect, but for swimming. and that frogs with long legs tend to have larger webbed feet on the bottom. So those long legs make for strong swimmers, thus the webbed feet. Tree frogs tend to have shorter feet, but larger toe pads to make them better jumpers in that environment. So the length or kinds of toes or webbing or amount of webbing that frogs have on their feet all relate to the environment in which they live. It's interesting to me that frogs and animals have so many adaptations to their environment. And then I look around at people and I think, oh, we missed that part of the adaptation. So those are the questions that we have from our young people. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Come on.
Yes.
Do you think our human adaptations may be more internal, mental, psychological, social than physical?
Sort of. Yes, certainly scientists would say that the interior life of human beings is one of the ways in which we adapt to the world. It makes us able to, we're excellent tool users, we're creative in nature, we find solutions to problems. My maybe is that I don't actually think that we are exceptional in that way, or we are solely exceptional in that way in the natural world. To think that we are the only creatures on this planet that use tools, we know that's not true. Primates use tools. Primates are all really excellent tool users. But we are also, I think, not the only human beings that are creative, that we are not the only beings that are creative, that feel deeply, that have social structures that are important to the way in which we survive. Whales obviously are a fine example of beings that do many of those same things. Not in the way that we do, obviously. So I think, yes, obviously our internal adaptations are part of what make us, where we see adaptation. But we're not alone in that, I think. Others?
I have a question.
Yes.
As your experience as a religious educator in the South and the Northeast and now the Midwest,
Yes.
what's different about where you are now from where you've been?
Yes.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, so Kathy has said, I have lived in a lot of places and done this work or similar kind of work in different geographies and localities. In the South, in New England, I was trained when I went to seminary that was out west. What makes kind of the Midwest here kind of different? What are different kinds of experiences? So I would say one huge difference between here and New England is obviously the number of UU churches that there are. That the church that I served previous to coming here, there were 5 UU churches within a 2-mile radius of the church.
Oh my gosh.
And that would be said, that's essentially, there are 5 UU churches in, all of greater Cincinnati. So the geography of UUism is much more compact, as are many things, in New England. So I think that is one huge difference, which changes how you collaborate, what kinds of collaborations are possible, how you work with colleagues, how many colleagues you have. All of that makes a huge difference. I will say one of the things that that I often note to folks, not just as a religious educator, but the difference between most localities in the South is one that sometimes surprises people. I think that the ways in which Southerners talk about race and racism is a lot more plain.
A lot more what?
Plain.
Plain.
Yeah, direct. It's on the surface. Race and racism are very prominent part of everyday life in the American South, in part because of the kinds of diversity that you see in places like that. When I was in Atlanta, I was not in a UU church. I was at a university, Georgia State University, which is the state school in Atlanta, is a majority serving institution, which some folks, we don't think of that. We don't think of racial diversity as a hallmark of the American South, but it is. And it changes the way in which people talk about race and racism. It's much more on the surface. And that's certainly true, hugely true, when you compare New England from the American South. And I'm still figuring out Cincinnati. We moved to Cincinnati in July before the pandemic. And when we moved, I still worked in Boston, so I spent half my time here and half my time in Boston. And then we had Ben, and then there was a pandemic. So mostly what I know of Cincinnati is my house and my neighborhood. So I don't know if I'm yet capable of making a lot of observations about like our culture, because I just know the culture of my house and my neighborhood. Last one? Any one last question? Yes?
What could we do to best attract young people to the church as things start to open up?
Yeah, so I think,
And you need to repeat.
yes. So what can we do to attract young people to the church? So two things. First, I think we need to define what we mean by young people, right? That can mean a lot of different things depending on like who we are, right? Young people can be like kids. Young people can be teenagers, young adults, 30 or 40 somethings, depending on the average age of a congregation. So I think the first thing is parents, families want to be where other kids are and are having a good time. So I think like that's been a priority for me, like that our program and what we do with our kids is exciting, that they want to be here, because then when visitors come, they see a place where kids want to be. So that's the first thing. I think that it then becomes a question of, you can extrapolate that out. Like if we wanted young adults here, we would need to do programs that attracted young adults in large enough numbers that they wouldn't be the only one. No one wants to be the only one in a space, right? That's any of us. That's true for any of us. So if I'm like 20-something and I'm looking for a church and I come into a church and I'm the only 20-something in that, in that experience, it doesn't mean I might not want to come back. That's something that might not be so exciting that I would want to come back, but you would want to be able to see or find people in a place. So I think like the question is always, who is not at the table, and how do we make sure that when we invite people to the table, we're doing that for them and in a way that affirms them and their identities, and that they can see themselves as much as we're doing it for us. So that's our, yes. Yes?
We have a question on Zoom. Referencing the different places you live, where did you find people the most outspoken about their levels of belief?
The South. Yeah. So this is a story. This is not my story, so I'll tell a story about my wife. My wife is Jewish. We are raising Ben Jewish. She was a medical student and a resident in Atlanta. She was in a surgery once, like literally on a rotation where she is in someone's surgery. Okay? And the anesthesiologist, not like another colleague, like the actual anesthesiologist, there was some conversation about religion, and Em said that we would raise our kids Jewish. And the anesthesiologist said, well, why wouldn't you raise him Christian? It's Judaism plus Jesus. And she was like, I don't know what she said. She was like, it's an awkward situation to be in. She's a learner in that environment. She comes home, she tells me this, and I was like, what kind of Christian thinks their religion is Judaism plus Jesus? Like, as a Christian, I was like, my religion isn't Judaism plus Jesus. So I think, like, in the South especially, like, around belief, like, Southerners believe out loud. They believe it all over the place. In public. Now, that's great for UU churches in the South, right? UU churches in the South do really well because they might be the only place that has our particular view of religion. And because everyone's believing everything out loud, people are like, oh, that church works much better. So it works to the advantage of Southern churches and Southern UU churches. But yeah, like 100%. Southerners are not quiet about their beliefs in a lot of ways. They might be polite and genteel, but that doesn't mean that they're quiet. So thank you for your questions, and to our kids who have our exciting nature-based questions, thank you for offering them, and thanks for the opportunity just to talk for a minute.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you mic me back? Okay. So just for a second before Regina comes up, I just want to hop on that and say that my experience as a Southerner, and also in Tulsa, which they think of as the South, but we don't. We Southerners don't. The first question you get asked here by someone is, where did you go to school? The first question you get asked in the South is, where do you go to church?
Yeah.
So if you're following along in the order of service, you see that it's time for our offering. And our weekly offering helps others beyond our small church community, because all people everywhere deserve to have healthy food and clean water and fresh air and warm clothing and feel safe. And interparish ministry is a monthly mainstay of the many rotating nonprofits we support. Our ongoing connection to IPM and their mission to provide food and support services to clients throughout Claremont and Hamilton counties is one of the cherished parts of our congregation's work for many of you. You've already been very generous during this holiday season and have contributed to the purchase of a large pile of gifts currently sitting in my living room. And those will be delivered later this week for distribution during the IPM gift event, where families can choose gifts for their children, and children can pick out items for their adult family members. IPM expects around 400 families to utilize the holiday store this year. But of course, in addition to all that stuff, they still need a steady income of dollars to help assure that these families also have food and supplies and warm clothing, and today's offering will go to that support. You can contribute to the plate when it comes around, or I believe we still also have a donation box on the welcome table if you want to drop in something as you leave today. And you can also donate directly to their donation button on their webpage, which is interparish.org. As always, thank you for all the ways that you share the abundance of your life and your spirit with others.
gift. May it be a blessing to those it will serve.
Somebody's calling my name. Hush. Somebody's calling my name. Hush. Hush. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? I'm so glad that trouble don't last always. I'm so glad that trouble don't last always. I'm so glad that trouble don't last always. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? I'm so glad I got my religion in time. Hallelujah. I'm so glad I got my religion in time. Oh, glory, Lord. I'm so glad I got my religion in time. Oh, my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? Soon one morning, death come creeping in my room. Soon one morning, death come creeping in my room. Soon one morning, death come creeping in my room. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? Hush, hush, hush.
Hush. How can we attend to the call? How can we hear that still small voice within unless we take some time to be quiet, to prepare us for a time of silence and wonder, to open our hearts attend to this prayer by Lisa Friedman. Spirit of life and love, why is there something instead of nothing? Why do wishes sometimes come true when spoken beneath the stars? Why, after millions of years of life on this earth, does death still sting? Why is it so hard for people to learn to love one another? Questions rise up within our souls, born of fear or delight, sorrow or joy, hope or confusion. And the questions live within us. They make us human. Help us, O Spirit, to embrace them. Now is the time for letting yourself sink into the mystery, for letting yourself wonder. We are here together, but just you, now. Let yourself be quiet. Let yourself ponder the questions. Blessed is the silence, and blessed are the questions. Amen. That's one of my favorite times of the whole week, that minute or so we just had together. I love watching. Usually I have my eyes closed, but at some point I open my eyes to decide when it's time to speak. And I see you as you are in your space of silence. It's awe-inspiring. Thank you. Blessed are the questions, indeed. But there's a group of people you will probably never hear saying that sentence. The parents or caregivers of toddlers. Because what's the favorite word of a 2 or 3-year-old? You knew the answer to that one, didn't you? Why? It used to frustrate me on a good day, drive me batty on a bad one, when my son would get on a roll with those whys. Why are dogs furry and armadillos not? I guess our resident biologist, Lacey, already answered that. Why do I have to wear socks? Why did that man throw his plastic bottle along the side of the road? Why is the sky blue? Or, growing up in Ohio, why is the sky gray? But like most parents, I survived the why stage, and now I kind of miss it. And I wonder, why do the years go by so fast? I think I know at least one answer to why kids of a certain age ask all those why questions. They're trying to figure out how everything is connected. They seem to get at an intuitive level something that we adults have long forgotten, that everything is in fact connected, and that they're just trying to understand those connections. As children grow up, however, they are taught that, as Goldie Chan wrote in a recent article in Forbes magazine, Giving answers is more important than asking questions, whether it's in the form of exams in school or job interviews or just being able to contribute in a conversation. Research shows that those who get the questions drummed out of them by frustrated parents or teachers, or simply by our Western culture's emphasis on having answers rather than asking questions, suffer from poorly developed emotional intelligence. Who among us hasn't been in a relationship or just a conversation where they simply wish the other person would ask the right questions? How does that make you feel? What happened then? Can you tell me more? Even how was your day? When asked with genuine curiosity and care, opens hearts and builds bridges. Now, we Unitarian Universalists are known, or at least we think we are known, as the questioning religion. While most religious people would consider that phrase to be an oxymoron, questioning religion, we pride ourselves on questioning pretty much everything. Authority, for sure, dogmas and creeds, the words of hymns, where the chairs are placed in the sanctuary, you name it. Now, this goes way back in our history, as I was reminded this week during our UU history class. The earliest small U Unitarians and the earliest small U Universalists questioned the conventional wisdom and doctrinal declarations of the mainstream religious beliefs of their time. Kind of reminds me of when I grew up in the South and I questioned the mainstream religious beliefs of my context. But the questioning goes so deep in our UU DNA, it remains part of us today. And so, yes, today, we have set some time aside in our worship for you to ask questions. We'll get to those in just a moment. But first, a little more history. A decade or so before I came to Heritage Church, there was a remarkable music director here named Shelley Jackson Denham. Shelley was beloved not only in this community, but throughout the UU world, so much so that 5 of her hymns appear in our hymnal. And we frequently receive donations from around the country to our Shelley Jackson Denham Fund by other UU congregations, ministers, and musicians who are using her music. Shelley wrote the hymn that we're about to sing under the title Credo, which means I believe. And this is what Shelley believed about the world, about nature and human nature, about where and how we find meaning. So in honor of Shelley this morning, please join me in singing hymn number 354, We Laugh, We Cry. If you rise, if you're out there, please rise as well. 354.
Strength believe that growing is an answer. Our eyes are full of wonder at our time is very brief, and death of one among us fills us all with pain and grief. But as we live, so shall we die, and when our lives are done, the memories we share with friends will linger on and on, and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a place to be together. We have the right to grow. We have the gift to believe, and we fulfill our living is an answer. We seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all the waste of human strife. We search for truth, equality, and blessed peace of mind. And then we come together here to a sense of love we find. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found a joy being together. And in our search for peace, maybe we'll find how we seek, even to question truly is an answer.
Thank you for singing. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for opening your hearts. I saw a lot of tears, a lot of people moved by Shelley's gift to us. Even to question truly is an answer. So the time has come to open the floor to you for your questions. You here in the sanctuary, you out there in the Great Hall, you out there in Zoom land. What questions do you have for me this morning? I may not have an answer, but I'll give it my best shot. Neil.
First of all, a disclaimer. I was raised Jewish. My question is, it seems of all the great religions in the world that those who are followers of Christianity, believers, or those who participate in the Christian faith, seem to be the most forward about pushing their religion on others. And I don't want to say that in a negative. I just couldn't come up with another term. Proselytizing is the word that's often used. Bill, why do you think that is?
What do I think that is? So, Neil asked, as a person who was raised Jewish, about my thoughts on the experience many of us have of, in a Christian-dominated culture, with that particular religion being pushed publicly on the rest of us. See, when I have to restate your sentence, your question, I get to frame it too, right? So, I mean, I go back to what Lacey was saying, and you know, her and my experience growing up in the South. It was, Christianity was in your face all the time, every day. more so in that part of the country than other parts of the country, but with media, it's just, it doesn't matter where you are geographically. But I will point out that in other parts of the world, someone would be asking that question, and the word Christian would be changed to Islam, or the word Christian would be changed to Hinduism, or the word Christian would be changed to something else. This is not unique to Christianity. It's unique to our culture that it happens to be Christianity. But the tendency or the desire to be so assured about one's own beliefs that the outside world needs to conform to that, I think is fairly common human trait. I also, somebody, you probably could have had a little parlor game going, betting on how long it would take me to bring this to death, right? But Christianity in particular proposes an answer to our greatest human fear, which is death and what happens to us as individuals when we die. So there's this answer given that I think it increases the need to really cling to that answer and to have that answer be right. That's somewhat unique to Christianity. So I guess that's my two-part answer to your question. Yeah. And so that wasn't a question, but I'm going to restate it and sort of elaborate on it. There is a line or two in the New Testament called the Great Commission, which charges believers with going out and converting others. So that is the explanation for doing that, right? That was written in a time when the believers were an extreme minority and were persecuted and prosecuted, right? So there's a certain self-defense involved, self-protection involved in that as well. That Great Commission is a charge to, 2 or 3 lines, like I say, out of the whole Bible, to go do that. Now, there are probably 2 or 3 lines in other sacred texts that can be plucked to justify most anything. Got anything on Zoom yet? Nope. Yes.
Steph Casey, I'm going to go a little bit different track. With the change of the seasons, the trees were full of leaves, bright green, change colors. Now most of them are bare and naked, showing their skeleton. Do you have a preference when you look at the trees, whether they're full of leaves or they're bare? And if you do, why? And if you don't, why not?
Why not? So the question is changing seasons, trees with leaves, trees without leaves. What's my preference? It depends on where I am, like physically. So when I went to watch the video, went out there and watched the video was right here, round window was right there. I could see what was going on in the video, right juxtaposed to the outside world. Out this window, I prefer leaves. So I guess in my sacred space, I prefer leaves. Maybe the answer is going to be leaves. In my home, look out the back window. In the summer, we're the only house in the world The leaves cover up all the other houses. Now, we can see 5 or 6 houses just on the other side of the creek. I prefer the leaves providing me sort of the seclusion. There are other places where, and I'm thinking about Heritage Acres actually, there are places when I'm out in nature where the sort of spindly limbs of the leafless branches against a good sky, it's a really moving, emotional, spiritual experience. So it depends. Thread that needle, didn't I? Okay. We have a Zoom question.
We have a Zoom question from Jonathan and Hope.
Okay.
If you weren't in Cincinnati, where would you be?
If I weren't in Cincinnati, where would I be? I'm going to presume that means to live on an ongoing basis. And with the wonder of Zoom, they can immediately say, yes, that's what it means. So I would say either Columbus or Atlanta, which are the 2 places I have lived where I have developed the most connections, friends, and have felt the most at home and grounded. There's a short answer. Yep. Oh, I was calling on Bob. I saw Bob, sorry.
Our faith espouses that we value the worth and dignity of every human being. How do you personally deal with upholding that principle in the face of people that you run into in daily life or you see through the media that seem to espouse something that's so antithetical to those values, that seem to be based in racism and homophobia, all that. All the isms of our day that we're bombarded with, how do you get beyond that and see that within a human being that doesn't seem to express that very well?
This is the ongoing UU problem or challenge. How do you get the idea of inherent worth and dignity in harmony with the kinds of individual behaviors we see in the world, or collective behaviors we see in the world that are so horrific? And I'm thinking of a few particular people in the news this week, and how can I feel in my heart and believe that those people have inherent worth and dignity? It's very hard, but it's sort of an intellectual exercise, and it's kind of a detachment exercise for me too. If I'm into my heart and my feelings, I get really angry, right? But to think in terms of the billions of people on the planet, the probably umpteen billions, maybe trillions of human beings that have walked the planet over time, the tininess of the planet compared to the universe, each expression of the spirit of life, and these are people who are expressions of the spirit of life, I do believe has inherent, as in born simply because of their existence, worth and dignity. So there is a worthwhileness, they have a place and a purpose in the scheme of things, and dignity as in warranting fair and just treatment. There was a question over here.
Yeah.
And we got maybe time for 2 more.
Can you provide some context to the quote from George Bush at the top of the bulletin?
The quote from George, so when you will remember the fall of 2000, when George Bush and Al Gore were in a bit of a tight battle for who would be the next president. one of the most consequential elections, a lot of different ways. About a month before that, I'll tell you about my earring, and hopefully the Zoom people get back in time. Why is everybody laughing so hard? Well, I mean, I think it's actually kind of neat. You know somebody for 20 years, and literally every single time you've ever seen them, they have an earring, and you don't notice it. It's a very subtle earring. It's a tiny, tiny little thing. It's a diamond that my wife gave to me when she proposed to me on Christmas morning of 1993. So it's my engagement earring. A lot of people have an engagement ring. I have an engagement earring, and it truly, the only time it ever comes out is like if I'm going into a CAT scan thing, right? Where I have to take it out. Yeah. Well, see, the light's always different. All during the year. That's one of the cool things about this. And I have on new glasses, and the frames are more silver than gold, so they're more bright. Who knows? On that note, we can either end it, or we can let's have one more, if there is one more. Yes, Valerie. Him.
It said something along the lines of, if you have a question, then there is an answer, just by asking the question. That helps with that. And I guess I wondered how you felt about this, but something that I found that works a lot for me lately because of the chaos in the world, and like we were talking about, like how do we deal with these people that seem like they have such hate in their hearts, when I know that inside their essence is not this hateful, I just know that. I don't know why they're being like that, but so the thing that I do is I just sometimes say to myself, I have this question, and I need to work on this, or I need to solve this problem, and I just say, I don't know what to do. You ever do that?
Oh yeah. So I guess I don't know how to restate the question, but the question is, do I ever come up against a conundrum where I just sort of say, I don't have the answer to this, and that's okay?
Yes.
That happens all the time. I actually wish it happened more often, but yeah, we don't have all the answers, and we like to have all the answers. Like I said earlier, society teaches us that having the answers is what's really important. But we're just this little species, and we don't understand all kinds of stuff, and we get full of ourselves and think we should understand everything, and really all that matters is a little giggling child. That's where, if somebody was to, sometimes people ask, what's the meaning of life? That's the meaning of life, right there. Okay. Les has a, that is, hey, Reed, is Zoom back?
And I want to encourage you and everybody else to sing along if you want to.
Music.
Someone told me long ago, there's a calm before the storm, I know, and it's been coming for some time. When it's over, so they say, it'll rain another day, I know, shining down like water. I want to know, have you ever seen the rain? I want to know, have you ever seen the rain coming down on a sunny day? Yesterday and days before, sun is cold and rain is hard, I know, been that way for all my time, till forever on it goes, through the circle fast and slow, I know, and it can't stop, I wonder. I want to know, have you ever seen the rain? I want to know, have you ever seen the rain coming down on a sunny day? I want to know, have you ever seen the rain? I want to know, have you ever seen the rain coming down on a sunny day?
You know, it's not long until that turns into why. And I invite you all to tap into your inner toddler this week and ask why. Don't tap into that slightly older kid who came to realize that constantly asking why was annoying and therefore just started doing it to get a reaction. But the genuine, curious asker of questions, seeking to understand the world and relationships and questions. You know, I generally don't correct people's parenting, but don't worry about shushing him. It's cool. We encourage the expressions and the questions, and may we all find a little bit of that inner child this holiday season. And oh, by the way, since no one asked about the cover of the program, today, yes, Batman was my favorite TV show as a child, and yes, the Riddler was my favorite villain, and I use that as a segue to say, see you right here in this sanctuary or on that Zoom next week, same bat time, same bat channel. The time has come for our closing hymn and benediction. Please rise in body or spirit wherever you are. The closing hymn is number 411, and we're going to let Les play it through once before we sing. 411.
Peace, the day
of life
May the Spirit of life
that each of us possesses
that each of us possesses
flow from one to the other.
flow from one to the other.
May it stay with us
May it stay with us
and bring us peace and harmony
and bring us peace and harmony
until we meet again.
until we meet again.
Amen.